Welcome to today's KM World webinar, brought to you by HawkSearch and Expert AI. Now, let me pass the event to Jonathan Meyer, Senior Solutions Engineer, HawkSearch by Bridgeline. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction there, Mary D, and thank you for KM World for having us here today. Looking forward to discussing the future of AI and machine learning. So as Mary D just indicated, my name is Jonathan Meyer. I am the Senior Solutions Engineer here for the HawkSearch by Bridgeline team. Just a little bit about myself so you guys know where I'm coming from. I've been in the search and space for about 10 years now, close to a decade. Been working with HawkSearch for 8 of those years. So I have lots of experience in this space. And one of the very cool things that I have seen happen over the time frame is kind of the evolution of machine learning and AI as it relates to a search functionality. So was really excited to come here today and have this conversation and to speak to you about that, especially from the search space, which I think is something that has a lot of great, there's an interesting trajectory that we're going to talk about there. So let's get into that. What will you get out of my part of the presentation here? Really, we're going to cover kind of how machine learning and AI personalization are going to work with e-commerce and search. So when you think of search, I think sometimes there is this kind of concept of it's all just commerce. And obviously for the group that we're talking to here, there's a lot of different industries that we're speaking to. So we want to make sure that we're not just thinking about this in a commerce regard. There's a lot of different things that search can help drive. We're going to walk through lots of those different examples there. The other thing that we want you guys to be aware of is kind of what are those strategies? When is there, when are we talking about machine learning? When are we talking about AI? What are those strategies that we're going to be talking about? And how can we lead towards that kind of search success, which is obviously going to be really informed by that relevancy there. So let's move into the actual conversation here. What is the future of AI and machine learning? Well, we have to start off with a fun little graphic here. This robot striking the classic pros there, saying we can do it. And that really is kind of the overall takeaway here, is that really kind of offloading a lot of the functionality to that machine learning, to that AI, to help drive a lot of the functionality that we're going to be covering here. But what does the future of that mean? And really for us, the way that we're looking at this is going to be more of it. If you think about AI and machine learning, it's really been something that has been some kind of relegated to your larger companies. It's been specialized. It's been very kind of focused on what it's trying to do, and those are all great. We're going to obviously see that continue. The specific applications for machine learning and for AI are only going to get more specific, and they're only going to get into different industries and different areas. Where we really see that happening, though, is that it's just going to continue to expand. It's going to become more prevalent because as it's getting into different areas, different industries, different applications, different uses, you're just going to run into more and more and more of it. From the HawkSearch side, where we really think that this makes the most sense is really kind of bringing it into everyone's toolkit. That it is not something that is only in the domain of your Amazons and your Netflixes and those larger companies, where you can take advantage of some of those strategies, some of those kind of ideas at a much smaller level, where you can still take advantage of that functionality. So more of it is really just kind of the takeaway here from us on terms of what is the future of AI and machine learning. Just getting it into more use cases, more applications, more people's hands. So let's start with that. What does that actually mean? Well, the first part of that, wisdom of the crowd. This is really kind of the core. When you think about machine learning, this is probably what you're thinking of. What is machine learning going to drive? Oh, well, it's taking advantage of all of those different things that we're seeing from the crowd. What are your visitors doing? Especially when we start thinking about this from a search perspective, there's a lot of different areas that can touch on. So let's get into the actual presentation there then. What does that actually mean from the machine learning wisdom of the crowd? So kind of a takeaway, if you're thinking about anything of what are we thinking of with machine learning and wisdom of the crowd, from a search and e-commerce perspective, one of those pieces is going to be that idea of, customers also bought, making recommendations based off of what other visitors have done. So we're going to work through several different interactions here, several different examples that we can help kind of show you what we're talking about with this. So moving into the first example here, this is really just kind of a live site example. I believe this is Target that we pulled this site from, a screenshot from. We were looking at a modular drawer. And within this, obviously, when you're looking at that, you're obviously, one of the very common use cases, one of the first use cases that we really see kind of machine learning being leveraged in is this idea of taking advantage of the signals of what other visitors are doing. And one of the things that you can really leverage this for from a commerce perspective is to help kind of increase that average order value. If I'm looking to buy that particular drawer, well, here are the other accessories that might be going with it. Here are the things that other visitors are commonly buying along with this. And you can see this in a number of different applications, a number of different use cases when we're thinking about this from the perspective of, when can you leverage this? In this example here, this was just kind of on that detail page. You're looking at that product cart, or you're looking at that product, you're scrolling through, maybe you're reading the short description, looking at some reviews. Well, you're going to also see this frequently bought together strategy. This is an example of that wisdom of the crowd, taking advantage of those signals that the machine is able to track to see, well, when we're looking at this, this is what other visitors have added to cart and bought together with this product. Streamlines that functionality. In the past, this was something that was much more manually driven, where you would have to have a marketer or a merchandiser, a product manager going in and making those recommendations manually, assigning those relationships. Here we're doing this, we're offloading that to the machine, we're tracking those signals and able to go ahead and make those suggestions using those signals. Now, here is another example here. A very common kind of commerce example is when someone is going through that checkout process. They've added that item to the cart here. You can see this screenshot that we have here of we've added some satin fabric from a site to our shopping cart. Well, another common area that you might start to leverage that machine learning from that wisdom of the crowd is to help drive that people also bought suggestions in this kind of interstitial. Really common use case that you see nowadays, where when you click that add to cart button, you get another pop-up, you get a window or a sidebar flies out or something like that, where it's being confirmed that you've added that item to your cart. It'll show you that item, and then this is another great area to leverage those wisdom of the crowd strategies of people also bought. And again, this is informing that relationship against this experience of what the other visitors have done on this site. Really want to drive that home, because this is an important part of that first level of machine learning. When we're thinking about this from, where is this going? Well, this is taking advantage of all of the other signals you already have on your site, looking at what those visitors are doing there and using that to inform those suggestions. But it's not just customers also bought. We're going to look at another example here. Again, this is an example of I'm looking to buy some jeans. And you can see that we've got two examples here. So another great kind of best practice when we start thinking about machine learning and driving, kind of this wisdom of the crowd functionality, is to take examples of other experiences. So when we're thinking about this from a commerce perspective, it's not just, what have I then bought with this, but it can then be, what else would I look after this? What are other items that I viewed? What are other items that I searched for? Using those signals outside of just the purchase to help inform other suggestions here, and leveraging multiple suggestions as well. Really, one of the great benefits of this, automation is that it then, if it's all kind of free work at that point. That if the machine is learning from what your visitors are looking at, learning at what your visitors are actually adding to cart, what they're downloading, what they're reading, all of those other kinds of signals here. One of the things that you can do is really just kind of layer in multiple strategies to cover, hey, here's a suggestion for what other visitors have viewed. Here's a suggestion for what other visitors bought. Here's a suggestion for what's similar to what you're currently looking at. We're going to walk through several other examples of this, but really one of the things that you should understand is that when you're thinking about this machine learning, it can be something that you can layer in multiple different strategies on an experience to get as many suggestions in front of your visitors. And again, from your end, it's a streamlined process. It's learning about what your visitors are doing, so you're not having to manually make those suggestions as a time that you're sitting in front of the computer and assigning those relationships within the back end of your system. But I did mention that we're not going to just talk about e-commerce experiences here, so I do want to go ahead and provide you an example here of where we see recommendations coming within more of a content-driven experience. So here we're looking at a higher education facility. They're offering different courses, different programs, different information around different articles that they're on the site here. We're looking at a Master Gardener article on their site, and this is using that wisdom of the crowd to understand, well, what are other articles that the visitor might be interested in here? What are other articles that a visitor might have navigated to after this, read after this, a particular article that they had just browsed through? One of the other cool things here is that you can see that when we're thinking about this from a content perspective, because there is usually lots of different kinds of content that we're then talking about. There can be publications, there can be courses, there can be events, there can be documentation, other kinds of resources. With the recommendations, you can, slice and dice those in a number of different ways, where in this example here, it is being presented based off of kind of the initial topic, provides a way for the visitor of the site to not only get the automated suggestions of, here's what we believe might be the next article you might be interested in, but they could then say, you know what, actually, I was thinking about looking for an online course, or they can navigate to that, and then the automation will go ahead and then make those additional suggestions within that experience. And again, all informed based off of what other visitors are doing. So that wisdom of the crowd really is kind of looking at not just at an individual level, but kind of aggregating everyone's experiences to say, you have then, looked at this particular article. Well, what did John Smith then navigate to? And then what did Susan actually go ahead and download with that PDF? Did Joe go ahead and sign up for that class? Using those different signals, we can go ahead and start to build out this bigger picture, so that even if it's my very first time to the site, you're able to go ahead and drive these kind of relationships so that it's not this heavy lift, and you're still getting really good information in front of your visitors. So from a kind of back end perspective, what we do want to highlight is that there can be multiple levers that you want to pull along this experience here. And when we're thinking about this from a search perspective, those kind of signals can also be influenced from a search side. So we've really been kind of looking at more of the recommendations end of the experience there, of leveraging that machine learning to drive those kinds of suggestions. But you can also use those signals to improve search. So understanding, well, what are visitors engaging with, and using that to help improve the ranking of those results. And then, of course, thinking about this from a commerce perspective, obviously, you'd want to have the items that are being added to cart, the items that are being converted on, actually being floated up more towards the top, those kind of different levels of machine learning. Again, tracking those signals from the visitors in mass and using that to improve the search relevancy. This is something that can then be used to improve those results just by, dragging some sliders, really kind of taking that strategy and bringing that into the search perspective as well. But when we think about, machine learning, there is another aspect of that. And from the machine learning end, one of the things that I would highlight there is wisdom of the content. So we're going to make a little play here on wisdom of the crowd and kind of continue this on here. Wisdom of the content. So one of the other key things is not just looking at what is everyone else doing with the site. What are they navigating to? What are they searching on? What are they clicking into? What are they downloading? But using the content itself to help inform the suggestions that might be happening there. So let's go ahead and say that as an example here, if we're looking for kind of the top level, if there's a takeaway that you think about from, we showed you wisdom of the crowd, and it's that idea of, customers also bought. That's obviously being informed against what are visitors also making interactions with. Well, wisdom of the content, if you're going to take away anything from that, it's going to be similar items. It's going to be recommended accessories. It's going to be those kind of things where we're using the content on the page or around the product to make additional suggestions based off of that information. And again, this is happening by the machine, by the tool, looking at, well, what's the content that we're looking at? What is this product that we're looking at? And using those signals to inform the suggestions that we're making. So again, from a business perspective, this is kind of free merchandising. This is free ability to increase, time on site, free ability for you to increase average order value, because it's all happening behind the scenes without your marketer and your merchandising team needing, or your content manager or your product manager needing to get involved there. So let's go ahead and walk through some quick examples here. We're going to go ahead and cover this example here. We're looking at an example of a hockey stick in the senior division. This has got a particular brand name. This is obviously in the senior division, and obviously a particular kind of product here. The recommendations, using that wisdom of the content, well, the tool can know, the machine learning can know, while we're looking at a Bauer Nexus branded product, we're looking at a hockey stick style product, and that the division is senior. So when we're looking at the actual slide there, the recommendations that are being returned are similar products to what we're currently looking at. They're all from the same brand of that Bauer Nexus. They're all from the senior division. And of course, they're all other relevant hockey sticks. So this is a great example of taking the signals that we see on the page and using that to inform the product itself, the recommendations, using that wisdom of the content there. Another really great example that we see, especially in kind of like the B2B space, where there can be very complex relationships around the product that you're selling and the accessories that would go with that. Again, use the wisdom of the content. You've got all of this data around your content, your product catalog, your courses, your documentation. You've got all of this information there. Let the machine learning use those signals to make informed suggestions. So it's on this slide here, you can see that we're looking at an 8-ounce PET plastic straight-sided jar. The cap is not included, but we have other data. We know not just what the size of it is, what the material of it is, what the style of the product is, but we know that that cap is not included, but we also know what the cap size is. So a really great example would be to take that information of the cap is not included and what is the cap size, use the wisdom of the content to then say, here are the recommended accessories for that. Here are the caps, because there's no cap included. So we want to make suggestions from the category of caps. And what is the cap size that we're going to make suggestions from? Well, again, we have all of that data from the content to go ahead and make those suggestions. Another really great example is just similar items. So taking advantage of that kind of information and saying, here's similar products, here's other 8-ounce products, here's other straight-sided jars, here's other plastic products, using, again, that content to inform those suggestions. And of course, from a content perspective, again, we want to just not think about this from a commerce perspective, although this does have a commerce end to it here, talking about a blog post here about throwing a particular kind of Halloween party where we know that we're talking about Halloween decorations. We know that we're talking about specific brands and different kinds of products. If you have that kind of blog post even tagged with metadata or tagged with keywords or tagged with a category, that can then be used as wisdom of the content to pull in that information here to make suggestions around what someone might need to drive that kind of a party that we're talking about from that blog post. Now, the other thing I do want to talk about here, and this is kind of where we see a lot of the future of the tool going. We think there's the wisdom of the content, the wisdom of the crowd, all kind of handled through that machine learning. The other end of that is the personalization, the wisdom of you. You know best. You know what you're looking for. You know what you prefer. You know what you need for your job. You know what kind of content you're looking for. And so when we're thinking about wisdom of the crowd, well, that's really kind of big picture. This is, well, what does everyone kind of prefer? This is, you might not prefer the big blockbusters that are out in the theaters. You prefer the art house films. And so knowing that distinction there about what your personal tastes are can drive a very different kind of experience. And it's important when we think about the future of AI and machine learning is to know that distinction between what is machine learning driven, kind of that wisdom of the crowd, wisdom of the content approach, and AI, which we typically see being more driven through personalization, taking those individual signals to drive information and recommendations for you. So again, let's talk about what are the big takeaways that you'd want to think about when you think about personalization. That's going to be those keywords of you may also like, recommended for you, suggested for you. You is going to be obviously the watchword there when we're thinking about personalization. It doesn't just need to be that, though. You can also see that we have suggestions here based off of location. So understanding personalization can also mean that, well, you live in California versus me who lives in Chicago. We're going to have different experiences when we're looking for something like jackets. Or if I'm looking for, the nearest ATM branch, or if I'm looking for, that's a method of personalization, is understanding where someone's at, taking those signals around that individual visitor and being able to use that to make personalized suggestions on, oh, well, we know that Jonathan's in Chicago, so we're going to show him different examples than someone who is in California, using that as a level of personalization. So let's walk through some actual examples. Now, in your day-to-day lives, this is really one of those things that again, we start thinking about this from a big picture. What is everyone doing? This is what the big companies are doing. This is what Amazon's doing. This is what Spotify is doing. This is what Netflix is doing. AI personalization is like kind of their big focus, is really kind of not just taking that wisdom of the crowd approach, but hyper focusing on what we think you might be interested in. Netflix even does this crazy thing where they'll change the image out on the recommended show to what it thinks you might be more likely to engage with. So, someone might see a different cover for the Daredevil that we're seeing there than I would see. It's just they're really kind of getting into that hyper-focused personalization. So now everyone doesn't necessarily have access to that. Not everyone has the budget or the ability to spin up that many servers for someone like a Netflix or a Spotify. But there are things that your average smaller business than a Netflix can take advantage of. And so let's talk about a few examples of those. Again, taking advantage of that kind of experience of what is the individual signal. So not just knowing on a bigger picture what is everyone interacting with, but again, that idea of what are you looking for? Looking at, well, what searches have you as an individual searched for? What products have you as an individual navigated to? What content have you as an individual actually interacted with and read? What documentation have you downloaded? Where is your physical location? What orders have you previously placed? Using those signals, again, the AI, I should say in this case, can go ahead and take that information and make recommendations based off of those. So what have you recently purchased? Well, let's go ahead and make suggestions that are related to that, as you can see here for that just for you example. Taking advantage of a previous order history to very easily put that in front of in a B2B environment. That's a huge thing to be able to say, well, we know what you previously had purchased. Here are those items that you might be more interested in, and just kind of reordering very quickly. And we'll walk through some other examples here, different ways that you can leverage that. Recently viewed items is something that I think doesn't often get thought of as a personalization strategy, but it definitely is. It is what have what have I as an individual recently viewed. And these can be really leveraged in really great ways. Either, when you first come back to a site, it's a good way to re-engage with someone to say, oh, hey, you were last time you were here, you were reading this document, you were reading this article, you were looking for this location, or here are the products that you're looking at. Being able to leverage that into the autocomplete. You get into that search box. We're all kind of trained now that when you get into that search box, that as you start to type in, it's going to suggest the products that match. Well, a very kind of popular trend that we're seeing is to layer in recommendations into those experiences to make suggestions for, hey, you're back on the site. Here's what you were looking at last time. Maybe they're looking to actually complete that purchase now. So again, let's take a kind of high level. What does this look at from like a back end kind of perspective, and be able to use signals for recommended items to push into for kind of influencing search, as well as the different strategies that we have there of personalization, recently viewed, recently searched, making suggestions for also bought, but specifically for me, or what have other visitors viewed, but again filtering that against that kind of for me strategy. So hopefully you guys have got some good information, kind of where we're looking at, where we see the future of AI and machine learning, really kind of taking that bigger picture of all that high level functionality and bringing that more down to having it in everyone's hands. Really do appreciate the time. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Mary D.
Great. Super, Jonathan. Thank you.